ITS keeps moving forward in facing future challenges by providing the best facilities for the new generation's activities. The facilities support both spiritual and physical needs. ITS also provides research facilities in the ITS Science Technopark, including ICT and robotics, automotive, maritime, and creative industries. Therefore, the excellent generations from ITS will emerge and make history. ITS is a space for the new generation to express themselves. ITS is a place where the new generation learns new things and finds their purpose. ITS has become a place where the new generations that carry the future will be born.
ITS is a campus of science and technology, which focuses on the research and innovation, presenting technology for prosperity.
With a spirit of heroism, ITS brings the future before us. ITS, the University of Heroes.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, before we start commence the program, and here are the following webinar protocol. For each participant ID, please use your real name following with your origin of institution. All of participants are expected to mute the audio and only unmute the video during the event. We cordially invite you to take your own firm and comfort seat in your own room, and please avoid the backlight. Make sure that you have a good and stable internet connection. If you have an earphone or headset, we recommend you to use it so that your voice can clearly and loudly to be heard. During the Q&A discussion session, all participants, please use the chat box to deliver the questions. Thank you for your cooperation and consideration.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to guest lecture series on SDGs today, Tuesday, 9 March 2021. I am Fitria from ITS Global Engagement and will be your master of ceremony this afternoon. Thank you for joining our guest lecture series on SDGs today. Before we start our agenda, let me inform you of several things. First, please fill your attendance at bit.ly/attendance_GLS SDGs. Our committee also sent the attendance link in the Zoom chat room. Second, participants who wish to ask questions during the question and answer session, please send your question to intip.in/Q&A/GLS SDGs. The link for questions list in the chat room as well. Or you can ask directly by clicking the raise hand feature. Ladies and gentlemen, today's lecture theme are Innovative and Sustainable Business Models and Circular Economic Business Model for Integrated Farming, which will be delivered by our speakers, Dr. Martin Matthews from University of Westminster and Dr. Arman Hakim Nasution from ITS. The lecture will be moderated by Associate Professor Dr. Hoirul Mahfud from ITS. Before we start our agenda, allow me to deliver our schedule today as follows. First, lecture from Dr. Martin, followed by question and answer session. Second, lecture from Dr. Arman, followed by question and answer session. And third, closing. Okay, before we proceed to the lecture, let me introduce our moderator and speakers today. Our moderator today is Associate Professor Hoirul Mahfud from Institut Teknologi 10 November, Indonesia. About his educational background, he has finished his study for bachelor degree in IAIN Sunan Ampel, Indonesia, for master degree in IAIN Sunan Ampel and Erlangga University, Indonesia, and for doctoral degree in IAIN Sunan Ampel, Indonesia. And then about his work experience, they are Deputy of ITS Center of Public Policy and on Business and Industry, Head of Subunit Promotion and Public Relations ITS, and Lecturer of Islamic Study in ITS. And these are his several paper publications. They are Islamic Cultural and Arabic Linguistic Influence on the Language of Nusantara from Lexical Borrowing to Localized Islamic Lifestyles. And then the utilization of gadget in maintaining propertical values in millennial generation, International Journal of Peacock Social Rehabilitation. And then next for our speaker. So our first speaker is Dr. Martin Matthews from University of Westminster, UK. About his work experience, they are Senior Lecturer for Strategic Marketing, Global Markets and Strategic Perspectives. Consultant for the Lion Chamber of Commerce working on cluster policies and governance. And then consultant Renault Trucks developing their strategic 5-year plan with senior executives and senior management positions in 2 French business schools. And then his research is about trust inside and between firms and the institutional and learning processes and their consequences in industrial districts and clusters. Then for our second speaker, we have Dr. Arman Hakim Nasution from Institut Teknologi 10 November, Indonesia. About his educational background, he has finished his study for bachelor degree of Industrial Engineering ITS Indonesia, from master degree of Industrial System Engineering in Asia Institute of Technology Thailand, and from doctoral degree of Industrial Engineering in Universitas Gadjah Mada, Indonesia. About his work experience, they are Head of ITS Center of Public Policy on Business and Industry, Board of Expert in ICSB SME Organization, and then Head of Team Development Myanmar, Roadmap 2021 until 2045 on Healthcare Industry Research Innovation and Education 4.0. And these are his several national publications: Strategic Management VUCA Approach Based on REFO 4.0, Creative and Innovation Thinking, Supply Chain Economic, and then Entrepreneurship National TOT Module. Okay, without further ado, let's proceed to the main agenda. To Associate Professor Hoirul, the time is yours.
Thank you very much, Mbak Fitria, and all participants. Good afternoon, and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Well, everyone, respectable to the speaker, special for Dr. Martin Matthews from University of Westminster, London, UK. Hello, Dr. Martin, how are you today?
Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, according to where we are.
Okay, thank you. And respectable to the special speaker, Dr. Arman Hakim Nasution, Head of the Study Center for Public Policy on Business and Industry, DRPM ITS. How are you, Mr. Arman, Habib? And also the honorable all participants of this agenda. Hope all of you good happiness and good health as always. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I am Khairul Mahfud, the moderator of today's GLS SDGs. I am very pleased to see you here and welcome all of you to this guest lecture series. Today's agenda is about innovative and sustainable business models and circular economic business model for integrated farming. And ladies and gentlemen, our speaker today is Dr. Martin Matthews. Once again, he is from University of Westminster, London, UK, and Dr. Arman Hakim Nasution, head of the Study Center for Public Policy on Business and Industry, DRPM ITS. Before the presentation begins, let me inform how the presentation will be going. First, the speaker will be invited to present and deliver the material. After that, there will be question and answer session, and also followed by conclusion. And now, allow me to welcome the first speaker, special for Dr. Martin Matthews to deliver his presentation. Dr. Martin, this time is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here at ITS. I started my personal journey, if you like, on sustainability a few years ago when my daughter took me to see a film by Al Gore called An Inconvenient Truth. And that was a long time ago now. And I started to realize that we needed to change our behavior in order to avoid a catastrophe. And we are in what is today a climate crisis. I think we know that. If you're present here today, you probably realize that. And so at the University of Westminster, we created a master's degree in sustainable management and innovation, because we need to change the way the companies do business in terms of their impact on the environment, and we need to change the way that companies do business in terms of their business models. And my speech today, my lecture today will be about sustainable business models. So I haven't linked it to any particular SDG, although it could be linked to the SDG, which is about responsible production and consumption, which is a big one. And I should know what number that is. It's number 13 or number 15. So today's class or today's lecture is going to be about how we have to rethink our business models and the place of innovation inside that recalibration of business models, to go from a linear business model to a more circular business model. And I'll be using examples from our students here at Westminster in our master's degree, where we ask them to create a company based on the circular economic model, which I'll talk more about in a little while. So I'm just going to share my screen, if I is there. So there we are. I hope you can see that okay. So I'm going to
Okay, good.
there we are. Is that okay?
Okay.
Okay. So good. It's a long title, and we have the question of going from business models to sustainable business models via the circular economy and some innovation as well. And my school down there, the Westminster Business School, I would like to say that that is the view from my office, but unfortunately it's not the case. And of course, we're based in London, as you would have guessed from the name. And there is email there if you want to send me any questions about anything in today's class or in about the master's degree. And hopefully next year I'll be able to come to ITS and I'll talk about the starting point is quite simple and rather scary statistic, which will probably get to 11 billion people in the next 30 years. 11 billion humans living as we do with our current economic and business models can't continue. It's as simple as that. And if we look at, we can see, if you look at the world population, you can see quite simply that at the time of the beginning of the 20th century, the world population was only about 1 billion. So all that population growth has come about in the last 100 years, 150 years, and we cannot continue behaving in the same way towards the environment. And I think that's fairly a concerted effort to change. You could say one of the good things about the climate crisis is that it's sort of the cutting edge of changing the way that businesses and society works, because the climate crisis is now. Although if you are living in any area with high levels of pollution and in a city which is polluted all the time, then you know that also pollution crisis is now as well. But the climate crisis is at the leading edge, and the climate crisis is forcing us to change. And I think we have to change radically in the next 10 years, or it will be too late for the climate crisis. So the climate crisis is sort of the leading crisis, and there are obviously other crises following, which first and foremost, I would say, would be water resources. But that's not the subject of today's lecture. Today's lecture is the idea that we have, in terms of the inputs, we have finite resources. That's fairly obvious. And the outputs, the pollution is killing the planet. So whether you look at the equation from inputs or from outputs, you have a clear problem. And as I said before, I don't think we can continue this way. So we have been using this linear business model or linear economy of take, make, and dispose for forever, I suppose. And the problems have become more manifest now that we have, as I said, 8 billion people in the world. And we have 8 billion people who all want to consume and have the latest iPad or the latest iPhone. So we have to move away from this model here because this model doesn't work. And I have here what we call a Sankey diagram, taken from a very interesting organization in Britain which deals with recycling, which is called RAP.org. And it is for the British economy in 2020. And it's a very interesting diagram because we can see quite clearly that we have a problem in that if we start on the left-hand side here, we have, on the top left-hand side, we have domestic and import and direct material inputs into the economy are at 5.10 million tons per year, obviously. And then we have consumption, and then we have waste management. And so waste management at 207 million, so about half is managed in Britain. Some of it is exported, although the export is a problem in itself because it's not automatically clear that waste is being exported to countries who are managing it correctly. And it was probably a good thing that in 2018 or 2019, China refused to import waste from other countries. I think that was probably a good step, and it forced countries to think about their own waste management. And so here we have the problem is up here, other outputs, 232 million tons, which is basically going to untreated garbage, untreated pollution, and it's going to landfill, and it's going as CO2 into the atmosphere, other types of pollution into the atmosphere, and finally water pollution. And there was a scandal a couple of weeks ago in Britain where we found that one of the water companies had been dumping raw sewage into different rivers around Britain, and they were allowed to do it. It wasn't illegal activity. But instead of treating that sewage, they were dumping it into the rivers. So there is an interesting starting point where we can see that if we look at the recycling here, 137 million tons over 440 million tons is less than a third, probably about a quarter, between a third and a quarter. So we have a lot of effort to do. So let's see what our definition of a circular economy is. I think you would probably know about this kind of definition here. So that's quite straightforward. And it's about closing the material loops. So we have three strategies. We have slowing the loops, closing the loops, and narrowing the loops. And in terms of actual strategies, we can see how to do it. It's not that complicated. So we have the idea, and we start with a very radical idea, that the circular economy is actually about decoupling activity from consumption of finite resources. And that's quite a radical idea. And we are asking ourselves that question today, not just because about pollution, but because we're starting to wonder whether there are going to be enough finite resources to maintain our level of civilization, if you like. And so the idea is to think about the economy and think about business models in terms of systems with feedback loops. So we have three principles that we want to use. We want to design, and so we have to think about new business models, we have to think about new products, and we have to think about new processes. And I have a class with my master's students in an hour and a half where we'll be looking at this question of designing for innovation in that respect for the circular economy. So design is a central part of any sustainable business model, which seems pretty obvious. And we have to think about keeping products and materials in use. Now, this is quite a radical idea. This is quite a radical idea, and I'll give you an example of how radical this idea is that if I look at my iPhone, there are no components inside that iPhone that I can recycle to update that iPhone. So the iPhone is a very popular product, as we all know, and the weak point in terms of circular economy of this kind of product is that it's impossible to take out components inside that iPhone, which might work for the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and insert them into other types of other types of gadgets, shall we say, other types of telephones, other types of iPads, for example. There's no modularity inside the iPhone, and that's a simple step forward, but companies don't want to do that for very obvious reasons. They'd rather sell us a new iPhone than go through all the bother of taking the old iPhone back, pulling it apart, and pulling out components which are still useful. There is a Dutch company called Fairphone, Fairphone, a Fairphone, which has developed a smartphone which is based on modularity. And so you can pull apart that phone and you can, I don't know, keep the batteries, keep the processor, replace the processor with a more up-to-date processor, replace the memory chip with a better memory chip, and this kind of thing. So you can actually reduce the environmental impact of getting a new phone by designing in a certain level of modularity inside your product. And there are a few companies doing it, but if you're a small startup based in, I think it's Amsterdam in the Netherlands, where you have been in business for a few years and they're doing very well, but you're up against companies like Apple and others, and Samsung, et cetera, and it's very hard for them to fight against that. And companies don't actually want us to do this. And the idea of keeping products in use over a long period of time is quite a radical idea. I've talked about the iPhone. You can talk about the clothing industry, for example. One of the clothing companies, or a couple of the clothing companies who've had lots of success recently, are the European companies H&M and Zara. And Zara in particular has developed a business model which works very well, not at all circular. It's called fast fashion, where they have developed their supply chain and their value chain in such a way that they can get new products into the shops very rapidly. But of course, this kind of business model of Zara, admirable as it is based on the idea of increasing consumption. And when we look at the number of clothes which are thrown away every year in a country like Britain, the number of the amount of waste that is in that system, it's quite amazing. And so the clothing industry has a very big problem, and that problem starts with their basic business model, which is to say that every spring, every summer, every season, and I know that in Java there are not a lot of seasons, but in every season you have a new collection. And you put it on the catwalk, you put it in your advertising, and you, every season, every 3 to 6 months, you are constantly changing your stock and your clothes, and that generates enormous amounts of waste. Then you are pushing individuals to buy more and more clothes, and that kind of consumption cannot continue without integrating an idea of the circular economy into our behavior. And that's quite simple. It just can't carry on. And that's quite a radical idea. And then we have the final principle there, regenerating natural systems. There was a very good television program, which I recommend if you can find it. It might be on YouTube, I'm not sure. It was by the BBC presenter David Attenborough, who's very well known for his nature programs, and he's getting on now, he's over 90, and he was talking about his life in presenting nature programs and how he's seen lots of wild habitats being destroyed over his lifetime, because he was born back in the 1930s, yes, 1930s, maybe late 20s. And so he was comparing his life in broadcasting to the destruction of different habitats around the world. And he said something very interesting when he was talking about the current COVID crisis. And one of the reasons that we have a more and more transfer of diseases from animals to humans is quite simply at 8 billion people, we have used up more and more resources, and we are in proximity to different species that we were never close to before. And so Attenborough's argument about looking after biodiversity and looking after natural habitats was also an argument of self-preservation, because we have seen many diseases jump from animal species to human species in the last 10 to 20 years, and they cause obviously large amounts of damage. And that transmission from animals to humans comes about because of the increasing proximity between humans and animals, because we're not managing that proximity very well, and we're not managing natural systems very well. So those are the three principles for the circular economy. And so our students, just to give an example of the sort of thing that we do at Westminster, is that we have what we call a trash hack. We have an annual competition between the students. It is at 2 levels. It's on the master's degree and also in the university, or rather the business school. And we ask the students to choose a old industrial waste product. And I have 3 examples here. And the students have to make a business startup, a business case for reusing that product, that waste product. And we have one of my favorite products. You probably know it because it's from coconuts. It's cocoa coir. I'm not sure, never sure how to pronounce that. And it's taken from, if you don't know it, it's taken from the coconut husks. So you have an enormous problem in many tropical countries, notably Sri Lanka, Philippines, and India. I'm not sure about Indonesia. You have an enormous problem that with the coconut industry, you have enormous amounts of this coir waste. And it is very, very tough, and it doesn't biodegrade. So it just doesn't go anywhere. It sits in great big piles and it doesn't go anywhere. And it's used a lot in horticulture. You've probably seen it in horticulture. And it's also used in maritime activities for because it doesn't worry about getting wet, and seawater doesn't worry it. So it's often used with boats and yachts for different reasons. And so we ask our students to make a startup company, and the business model is, the starting point of the business model is industrial waste that is not used. So we've got coir there on the top left. Oops, we've got coir on the top left. In the center there, we have a London-based company which makes handbags from old fire hoses. And it's a very successful company. And they get their industrial waste from different fire brigades in London and the south of England, and they make a whole range of handbags and canvas accessories, which they sell with a very, very high markup when you consider that the inputs, the raw materials they're using are given to them free, and they do very well. And the third type of product that we have is something I had never thought of, but old aeroplanes, a classic example of a product which might have a long life, but needs to be recycled. And I find that a little bit amusing, but we asked the students to come up with business models and startups that might use this. So this year we had a group which took the coir product, and they said, okay, the very simple idea is that if we can make string with coir, we can make vegetable bags with coir. So instead of buying your vegetables in a supermarket or a shop in a plastic bag or covered in plastic, like almost everybody does in this part of the world anyway, then we could use coir, and as simple as that. So there's your starting point with a industrial waste product. So you're solving a problem by doing that, although you would probably need to make a lot of string to solve the problem, but it's a contribution to the problem. And then we asked the students to think about manufacturing costs and that sort of thing. So they found this factory in Tamil Nadu, I think it was. And finally, we said you have to be very clear and look at what kind of post-use we're going to have. So they came up with these kind of solutions where you can put it in the compost, although it doesn't compost that well, to be perfectly honest, or you can put it in your garden so it can supply nutrition for your vegetables in your garden if you have a garden. So that's the kind of innovation and the kind of circular economy that we start to ask the students to think of. And so that's for the circular economy. And now let's look at the way we might want to incorporate the circular economy into a business model. Strangely enough, we talk about business model, but it hasn't actually been around that long. The concept of business model seems to be quite self-explanatory. It's simply the way a business does its business. But it's only been around for 10 or 15, 20 years. And I think the business model, the idea of a business model, got started somewhere at the earliest period of the 20th century with the dot-com crash, or the dot-com boom before the crash in 2000 and 1999, somewhere around there, as the internet, as you know, spurred a whole level of innovation with companies with different and new types of business models. So a business model, we all sort of know what it is, and at the same time we don't. And it is a construct somewhere between strategy and implementation. It's a tool to redesign and reconfigure resources. So according to David Thies, it is a innovative tool to help companies to innovate, because we're thinking about redesigning and reconfiguring, therefore we are innovating. And then it is also if you like, a mindset which has a sort of a framework which helps us to understand how our business in this industry makes money. And so I have given 3 examples there. Pharmaceuticals, media, and telecoms all have their own particular beliefs about how you're going to make money in that industry. So it has, if you want to think about the different components of a business model, it's all based on the idea of value. And we have value proposition, value creation and delivery, and value capture. And those are fairly straightforward ideas, but they are key ideas. And if you're thinking of starting a business, you can do worse than use this kind of model to try and think about how you are going to create value, how you're going to deliver it, and how you're going to capture that value. And the link between a standard business model, such as this one, and a sustainable business model is very much up on the top left here in terms of value proposition. So up here on the top left, we're talking about creating different value for different stakeholders. And that is one way we can start to change from a business model towards a sustainable business model. So in the next couple of slides, I'm going to be developing this idea of value proposition, where we go from creating value for a certain number of stakeholders and enlarging that value creation to a larger range of stakeholders. And I put this one up because it's a very well developed slide where we have, if you like, an 11-point map, 11-point model of how we are going to create and deliver and capture value. So that's an interesting one taken from Bokken, and you can see there she's a professor at a Dutch university. And you can see that it's a fairly straightforward model. And now we have to try and think about going from your standard business model to a sustainable business model. And that we can do that, move from a business model to a sustainable business model. I won't talk about that. There's Osterwalder and Pinger I should say, they wrote a book in 2010, which is the central model on business model generation. I will leave that on the slides there. You can have access to the slides, I believe. And this is your standard canvas that many startups use, and indeed many companies use. And you can use this as an innovative model to break up your company into 11 chunks, if you like, and think about your business model in terms of these particular questions. And the main question we're going to concentrate on this afternoon is thinking about value proposition and how we can create your value proposition. Because if we move into a more sustainable business model, the very idea that we have a sustainable and circular business model becomes part of the value proposition. And so there is a large segment of consumers who are interested in the extra value proposition, which comes from incorporating sustainability objectives into your company's value proposition. And one of the best examples I can think of that is the British company called The Body Shop. I don't know if they've reached Indonesia. They're probably in an airport somewhere. They're a very large company. And The Body Shop has a long history, but The Body Shop incorporated sustainability ethos very early in its development. And The Body Shop has many sustainability ideas running through it, which include working closely with suppliers in countries like Brazil, or shall we say West Africa, working closely with the communities who supply some of their raw materials, and working closely with notions of sustainable extraction of resources, working closely, working closely with different aspects of the supply chain. So The Body Shop works very well with sustainable ideas, and the value proposition of sustainability has become a key element of their offer, if you like, of their value proposition. I should say, for those who don't know, The Body Shop, it makes cosmetics. I should have mentioned that, sorry. So it makes cosmetics for women, and it has a very strong value proposition, which started many years ago thinking about cosmetics and the way that cosmetics were tested on animals. And they said, we're not going to do that. So they had a strong value proposition to start with. And then they've incorporated different aspects of social and environmental sustainability into their business model. So how do we go from a business model to a sustainable business model? There's The Body Shop up there on the top right. So we have to think about how social and natural needs can become institutionalized as concrete social and cultural demands. Now, in this word institutionalized here deserves a little bit of explanation, because we have to think about, because what this means is, how does social and natural needs become the norm? How do social and natural needs become the normal way of doing things? And one of the ways that social and environmental needs become normal is by leaning on or creating value which is linked to that, and telling the consumer that, in the case of The Body Shop, that our products are made in partnership with local communities. I go back to my choir example of our students this year. The natural need is that there is lots of these waste products which aren't being used. They're polluting different landscapes around the world, and a natural need, therefore, is to use that. And so by having that kind of circular business model, we can start to think about creating value and showing people that that value created is a positive good for the consumer and also for society. And I think that's the way forward. So a sustainable business model is a holistic approach looking at a wide range of shareholders. And here we have two types of shareholders. This should be stakeholders. I'm sorry about that. That's a mistake there. So we have two types of stakeholders that we don't normally think of that much. And the natural environment is a stakeholder. And in the same way, future generations, when we think about the kind of world we're going to leave for future generations, they are also a stakeholder. That should read stakeholder, not shareholder. And the natural environment and future generations. So sustainability has two elements which we find in sustainable business models. It has two elements which are very different from our standard business model and our standard stakeholder models. And those two are the natural environment, which is clearly affected by human behavior. And the second stakeholder is future generations. And so we have these two factors, which are a reflection on the natural capital that we use, and also a change in the way that we look at time. And sustainability is first and foremost a question of changing our perspective on time. From a short-term perspective, I'm going to cut this tree down and build something with it. And then I'll cut the next tree down and build something with it. And that is using natural capital in a non-sustainable way. And then more importantly is this notion of going from the short-term use of that natural capital to a longer-term perspective of the natural capital. Quite simply, I'm going to cut that tree down, that's fine, and I'm going to plant another one, or even better, two. And in 20 years' time, my children will be able to cut that tree down and use it. So these two changes in perspective, one in terms of natural capital, and two in terms of a temporal change, a change in time, looking at more a long-term perspective rather than short-term perspective. And that's what I've noted down here, from short-term to long-term orientation. And we have economic orientated value propositions with environmental and social orientated value propositions. So this is the famous triple bottom line, where we are interested in people, planet, and profits. And a sustainable and circular business model should be able to incorporate all those three dimensions of sustainability: people, planet, and profits, the famous triple bottom line. And so a sustainable business model is a new type of business thinking, trying to think of business as a positive force for society and the environment, and also generating profit. So if you can do all those three things, then you've hit the bullseye in terms of sustainable business model. And as I said before, sustainability becomes a core value proposition. Now I have to be careful that I don't run over my time, considering also that I have a second lecture later on this afternoon back here in London. So very quickly, we have a couple more slides to finish off. So we can use a tool called value mapping. And value mapping is the starting point for creating a sustainable business model, because we start to think about how we might be able to create value, or rather map value. It's down here in the white square. Map value, which is examining value which is captured, missed, destroyed. And so we go a little bit further than your traditional business model, which just looked at value proposition, value creation and delivery, and value capture. We're starting to think about, if you like, blanks on the value map for a particular product or for a particular process. And those blanks might be places where value is destroyed or value is quite simply not seen, which is a classic innovative approach. And so from that value mapping exercise, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, we can start to look at creating superior customer value in terms of minimizing harm, in other words, reducing the value that is destroyed, and creating a more positive business model. And so that is our idea of sustainable business thinking and sustainable business models. So here's a very busy slide, and this is done, this is 2 more slides to go. So this is done with looking at the idea of dividing up your value in terms of, on the right-hand side here, value captured, value missed, value destroyed, and value opportunity, creating concentric circles. And then the next step, which I find an interesting step, is dividing up that circle into 4 quadrants and looking very closely at the different stakeholders that we can think about that our company is going to be working with. So we have your traditional stakeholders, the customers, probably the most important ones, obviously. Coming down here to the bottom right, we have our network actors. So you have the ecosystem of your company, suppliers, partners, distributors, etc., etc. And then we have a new type of stakeholder thinking about society and societal value. And then up here, we look at environmental value. And then we are going to start mapping this kind of model onto our business model and think about our products and our processes and think about the way in which we have captured value, we might have missed value, we might have destroyed value, and through these steps, we might be looking at different ways of creating value and new types of value opportunity for entrepreneurs and for existing companies. So the example I'm going to give next is a quick look at a practical example of how this value mapping might take place. And basically, we put this framework on the wall and we ask people to get Post-its and to put Post-its up in different places where they think they might be missing value or we might be destroying value, etc., etc., etc. So the next slide is the same slide here where we will do this and we will put Post-its on different companies where we have the idea of, this example here is a baby stroller or a pram from Holland, and we can see the kind of Post-its we've put up here, where we have a color coding system about value captured, value missed, value destroyed, and value opportunity. And let's look at some of the value destroyed here. Quite simply in the middle here, baby strollers that don't get recycled, they just get disposed of. So they're a product that might last for 10 or 20 years, but we are quite simply just throwing them away. And if you have 2 children, you might pull it out for the second child. If you have 3, etc., etc. But sooner or later, the children outgrow these things, obviously, and then you tend to throw it away. And not many people want to buy a second-hand one. And so the strollers are only used for a limited period of time. I might need another stroller, but I don't have the space in my apartment to keep the stroller. I don't benefit from the long-lasting products because they do last because they're quite sturdy. No one wants to buy a stroller which is not sturdy. And so we have a whole range of value propositions here which are linked to this value mapping. And so you can start to see where that particular company might be able to incorporate activities such as recycling the existing strollers or creating a market for second-hand strollers or creating leasing opportunities for people to hire a stroller for a year or 2 years. All these kind of different activities come to mind after we've looked through the problems of value created and value destroyed. And so you can see some of the summary here. The customers get an expensive product, which they need to get rid of. So we have negative value here from waste resources and economic loss. The products can last for 8 years, but there's a large second-hand market which doesn't exist. And we can, as I said before, we can refurbish, remanufacture, and recycle if we design a stroller which has component parts. So if a wheel breaks, it is very easy to replace it. And if a frame becomes twisted, we can replace it, etc., etc., etc. And so when we're doing this kind of value mapping exercise, we can start to think about how we're going to integrate sustainable ideas in terms of a more circular business model and inside a more circular economy. And this is my last slide here, and after that I'll be more than happy to take your questions about some of the things I've talked about. And I put up photos of a printer cartridge because this is your classic wasteful type of product where the companies have made a fortune out of this particular component. There are companies who recycle these products, I know, but I never seem to be able to do it. And at my university, we have a big pile of printer cartridges which are sitting in the staff kitchen for some reason, and we don't seem to be recycling them very well. So it's one of my pet hates, these products. And so this is a short slide here which looks at the basis for a circular business model inside a circular economy. And we are using the idea of value creation and value capture. So we have the value destroyed, if you like. So this is a new aspect of sustainable business models where we look at negative social impacts, non-renewables, environmental damage. So that's all negative for the environment. So there's your new stakeholder that is being taken into account with this business model. And we can reconceptualize that value destroyed as missed value, and we have underutilized assets, resources, and capabilities, and we have waste streams, which I talked about earlier on, and we want to capture that new value through new activities and a new network configuration in my baby stroller example being the creation of a second-hand market, creation of leasing, for example, for strollers, and that kind of new activity. And then we might find that we have new forms of value creation. So there's a very rapid look at the transition from a linear business model to a more circular business model, which mirrors, if you like, the transition that we have to go through in the next 10 to 20 years from a linear model to a linear economy to a more circular economy. And I think that's it for me. I hope that we've learned something about that. And I'll hand back over to the chair now, if you're there, and see if we have any questions.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Martin Matthews, for giving us such informative, insightful, and interesting presentation. So, ladies and gentlemen, all participants now come to the question and answer session. I also would like to have several questions from the participant, and also I would like to inform you all the question and answer session maybe can share to the link from the committee and via chat box, or can ask directly through picture of raise hand in this Zoom meeting. And I think, okay.
I think we can share the presentation materials. I think that was planned. Slides, no problems.
Okay.
Fine.
Okay.
Yes, I think
Yes.
there's a question in the link that provided to the. There's one question from Shifa Alin Rampi. Or maybe we can invite Shifa. If you're there, you can just unmute and ask your question directly.
Okay, Shifa.
It's a little bit quiet.
Okay. If you may, can I oh yeah. Shifa, he can't unmute. Can somebody unmute her?
Yes, Shifa, hello.
ITS_Shifa.
Oh, hello. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, I was earlier unable to unmute, I think, from some settings. So good afternoon, Mr. Martin Matthews. Thank you for the lecture. It was very insightful, interesting, and I do have questions regarding it. So, like all radical changes, implementing circular economy comes with risks and threatens present-day industries. For instance, tackling fast fashion may threaten the employment of thousands of factory workers from low-income countries, as well as raw material suppliers like cotton farmers, for instance. Are these concerns valid, or are they simply necessary sacrifices? And are there strategies to ease the transition towards a truly circular economy? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very good question, and you're exactly right to say that any transition from an old model to a new model is going to have winners and losers. And so when we look at, for example, your remark about workers in low-income countries, who are maybe assembling iPhones and iPads, if the product is, I use my iPhone as an example again, if the iPhone is created with components inside it that we can change, then that doesn't necessarily threaten any jobs. It's just a different way of thinking of the product. In terms of, I'm getting a very bad feedback, so I'm not sure when we're finishing. So you have this design question with components. Secondly, your raw material, your raw natural resources. It's a good question. Although, you take the example of forests in Southeast Asia, and there's one area where in the world where there's been lots of deforestation for a variety of reasons, and a lot of that deforestation has been non-sustainable. And if you cut down the trees and don't plant other trees, then you are literally destroying your economic model. So I wouldn't like to be a lumberjack, for example, someone who cuts down trees for a living in Thailand, because from what I've heard, they don't have many trees left. They've cut down so many in their jungles. And so or for example, to be a fisherman in parts of the world today is a job which is quite simply non-sustainable, because we are taking too many fish out. It's always difficult to persuade fishermen and lumberjacks that there won't be any more fish left and there won't be any more trees left. But if you look at the fishing industry in the North Atlantic, for example, to come back to this question of natural resources, the fishing industry for a fish called cod in the north of the Atlantic was huge. It employed literally hundreds of thousands of people because there were millions and millions of fish. And surprise, surprise, we caught them all and we've destroyed most of the fish. There's no more jobs in northeastern Canada for fishing anymore, for cod, because we've used them all. So the arguments that we're going to replace destroy jobs is a possibility, but through efficient design of products and efficient use of natural resources, we can, I think we can avoid that problem. But it's a good question.
Thank you, Dr. Martin, for the answer. And once again, maybe any question from the audience and participant? Okay, good. Okay, please. Maybe the committee from the Q&A link maybe help us to share the question. No problem. And this is
Sir,
okay. Please inform us.
can I ask question without the video?
Okay, Bu Rohmah, Nihayatul Rohmah.
Yes. I'm really interested with this lecture about circular economy, and because I'm from a chemistry background, I just heard about green chemistry because it has somehow similar with this circular economy. It also makes the use of waste like peeling waste and make it a future energy or battery. So can you tell me how the people from chemistry background can relate with this circular economy?
Okay, thank you for the question. Hello, Prof. Martin. Please answer for the questions.
Well, I suspect you might know more about green chemistry than I do. So I'm not an expert on green chemistry. In terms of the circular economy, you break up the loops into two types of loops. And one is material, which is, if you like, manufactured products. And the other is organic. And so essentially you're talking about recycling products through organic means, which means, I suppose it means composting and reusing those products in that kind of way. So you break them up into two sides. Now, where chemistry fits into that, I'm not entirely sure. I would say that it fits more into the idea of how can we look at the recycling of organic products and make them cheaper and more efficient to recycle organic products. You could also think about chemistry in terms of some of the new types of plastics which are coming out, which are quite often based on starch, but you can get starch from plants like waste products like rice stalks, for example, or corn stalks or potatoes. And that kind of starch can be used to make plastics which are biodegradable. So I would say that green chemistry has its role to play possibly in creating the organic loops and making new products which are biodegradable. And there is a lot of research done on starch for plastics, natural plastics. But again, you have a problem there in the same way that my Dutch phone company, Fairphone, has a problem, is that anybody who is making plastic, biodegradable plastic from plant waste today is going to be up against a huge multi-billion-dollar industry, which is the oil industry, which uses their waste from their refining to make plastic, and that's why plastic is so cheap. And so any new innovation like starch-based plastics is going to be fighting a entrenched, rich industry which is making very cheap products. So you're up against it there, and the only way to get around that is by government intervention. In my opinion, the market is entrenched making cheap plastics. So I hope I answered a little bit of your question about green chemistry, and I'm not 100% sure that I'm an expert on that particular factor. I'll go and look
Thank
it
you.
up.
I
Thank you very
got the
much.
point.
I'll go and look it up.
Okay, thank you very much from Mr. Martin and all participants because the time is limited. And Martin, Professor Martin, there is also busy, so that's I think
Yes.
enough for this opportunity. And thank you again for Mr. Martin Matthews, amazing presentation. And please, the committee maybe any something to share and
Yeah.
give for
Yeah,
Mr. Martin. Thank you.
thank you very much, Dr. Martin, for the excellent lecture today. And for all participants, please give applause to our first speaker, Dr. Martin. Okay, Dr. Martin, we would
Thank you
like
very
to
much.
present a certificate awarding for you.
Okay. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah.
It was a pleasure. I hope that in the future I can come to Surabaya and do it in person. But I have to go. I have another class here in London this morning.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Martin, for your availability on today's guest lecture series.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, have a nice day, everybody, and look after yourselves and be careful. Okay, and thank you very much for the invitation. It's been a pleasure to be here with IPS. Thank you, Cyril. Thank you, Fitria, and everybody else. And Arman, have a nice speech. Have a nice lecture.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, we go to the next lecture. Associate Professor Hoirul, I give back to you.
Thank you, Mbak Fitri. Okay, next. Allow me to welcome the special speaker also, and the second speaker, Associate Professor Habib Arman Hakim Nasution, to deliver his presentation. For Habib Arman, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Khairul. Let's allow me to share my presentation. Okay, can my share presentation be view well?
Good. Well.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. From the Dr. Martin explanation, we conclude that circular economic will open opportunity to innovate and create a new ways, a new model to make better environment. It means that also will increase opportunity to develop new entrepreneur. Now, from this slide, let me also introduce myself. I'm Arman Hakim from Center of Public Policy Research, and I'm also a senior lecturer in Department Management Business ITS, one of the popular department in ITS. In the second slide, we know that resources will use in manufacturing process and then will be delivered to customer. After the product done being used, some part of it can be recycled and being used as the added resources for the manufacturing process, while other part of the used product throw away as the waste. This is the usually mechanism on the manufacturing. But we know that there are difference between linear and versus circular. Maybe it had been explanation by Dr. Martin, but I also want to explain more. that in the linear economic, in the system, raw material are extracted from the earth being used in the production process. The output of the product then will be used. After the object is no longer used or its economic X run out, it will be thrown away as a waste. At the best, this economic lead to the relative decoupling of economic growth from the use of natural resources. But rather different with the reuse economic, but more in the circular economic. We know that raw material being used also in the production process, the output product then will be used by customer, and after being used, it will be recycled into the new fresh product. This is the differences, that the ideal picture is a circular economic in which material are never depleted. The economy can be structured so that there is a positive decoupling between economic growth and the growth of natural resources. In contrast to what happened in linear economic, a circular economic make optimal use of raw material and resources also. This means that this material and resources continue to be applied in the way that generate the highest economic value and the least environment damage. So from the slide, we can see that in the resource part, there are renewable energy and natural capital. In the production part, we use new revenue model, doing some product design and supply chain collaboration. The output product will be used by customer and then will be recycled and reused. High value reuse and recycle process will create a longer product lifespan, longer use of production part, and also recycling of material. If we talk about integrated farming, Center Study of Public Policy in ITS, it also have teaching industry in the AMKE. AMKE is the one of the farming area in the Batu, Malang. And the second, we just developed the second teaching industry in the Mojokerto. We know that in integrated farming, there are 9 components that consist of community engagement, organization and planning, soil management and fertility, crop health and protection until landscape and natural conservation. It means that in integrated farming, we must manage of the 9 components to make a better solution for our environment. And we know that the benefit of the integrated farming will give us multi-criteria evaluation. There are social impact evaluation, well-being impact evaluation, economic impact evaluation, environment impact, and also financial impact evaluation. This is the example of the Lambangka food estate that consists of agriculture, fishing, and animal husbandry. It means that in the Lambangka there are a good example in Indonesia for integrated farming that combine between agriculture, fishing, and animal husbandry. At agriculture sector, there are corn, green bean and horti, onion and vegetables. The industry in this sector are animal feed and food. While at animal husbandry sector, there are fattening or breeding cow and chicken, also egg. The industry in the sector are RPH or animal slaughterhouse, meat processing, and biogas. At fishing, there are fresh water, air, sea, water, fish, and salt. The industry in this sector consists of hatchery, frozen food processing, consumption salt, and also industrial salt. It means that in the Labanka, there are a good example that we can divide the market based on local, national, and international. And what kind of local product and what kind of national commodity that will be used in the integrated farming. So how to do that? How to do that? We can make the model of the system, for example, integrated farming, more circular. Step one is designed to be more circular. Government leadership, producer responsibility, and customer education and awareness will enable mechanism that drive higher resources productivity, innovation, and economic growth that can lead to successful create a circular economy. The system use fewer material that will be delivered into several processing consists of one, design. Product and packaging are designed to last longer and to be more durable, using more sustainable material that can be easily recycled at the end of life. It means that as we refer to the Dr. Martin, that we must make value proposition, value creating and delivery, and value capture. So sustainable become part of core value proposition in the holistic approach. Second, produce business collaboration and coordinate across sector to reduce greenhouse and gas production and fossil fuel use. Third, about distribute retail offer product that can be easily used and refurbished, offer end of life, take back or maintain and repair service, and support producer and providing education and awareness to customer. The fourth, customer use. It means that there are many customers can contribute to a circular economy, like making greener, buying choice, sharing asset, for example, cars, tool, and repairing them or offering them to others for reuse and refurbishing. Fifth, reuse and repair is mean that producers are fully responsible for recovering material from their product and packaging throughout their life cycle. And the last, recycle. Improve cost-efficient collection and treatment system will lead a pure and pure material, ending up in the landfill and support the economic of circular design. And the second step is design the business model. It means that circular supplies, recycle waste, and product design will obtain and deliver to the manufacturing process, such as logistics and marketing sales. After it arrives in customer hand, it will be used, being repaired, and also being sold by the customer. After the product reaches its end of life, the waste leakage will be eliminated and the other part that can be recycled will be sent to the start of the cycle to be upcycled into new product. So you mean this is the BMC model that had been explained by Dr. Martin. It means that business model is related with what value proposition we offer. If we have infrastructure and we have target customers, so we can make revenue structure and cost structure to get more profit. And the second, to make more better circular, we must measure the performance in the 4 factor. That is financial, social, economic, environment, and engagement of the society. It means that the all of the four factor must be done aligned. We cannot find just only financial measurement, but also the three of the factor: social, economic, environment, engagement, and also financial. Okay, thank you. We will back to the Dr. Hoirul.
Amazing presentation from Habib Arman Hakim Nasution, inshallah. And applause for Habib Arman. Ladies and gentlemen, now come to the question and answer session. Maybe all participation to share and give questions. Once again, please share to the link of a spreadsheet and maybe via chat box or directly to this Zoom. Please raise hand.
Dr. Hoirul, it seems Lutfi raised hands. He want to ask.
Okay, Mas Lutfi, please.
Yes.
Question.
Okay, thank you. I want to ask about one of your slides. One about around the couple first slides, the one that tells us about circular economy around La Banca Food Estate. They're like the waste from the animal, the farm can be used as a food source for the fish. I'm actually not understand the technology used for process like that. Maybe you can explain to us.
Okay, good question from Mr. Lutfi.
Okay,
and
good question.
And once again, and hello, Mr. Arman.
Yeah,
and this,
hello.
And this in the chat, maybe also want to respond directly. How do we, from Iman Taufik, how
From
do we
Iman Taufik, how
yes,
modify the
business
when
facing?
destroy? Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. As we know that sustainable business model, yeah, is the modify of the conventional business model that create value proposition to more holistic approach. It's mean that all of the stakeholder must gain the benefit. Yeah, not only maybe, for example, the businessman getting profit, but the society will get destroyed. Yeah, it's mean that if we facing the value of destroy, yeah, we can motivate the new business model that create innovation. Yeah, create new proposition, value create, and value capture. Yeah, so it can be delivered to the customer better to solve the problem of destroy. And it's mean that the new model of sustainable business process model will need we to be more creative, creative and innovative. Yeah, this is the new solution that mean that it will create more entrepreneur, in the area. More a lot of entrepreneur can be developed in the area of sustainable environment. This is for the first question, yeah. But the second, from the
Mr. Lutfi.
Mr. Lupi, yeah.
Yes.
I forget this is the question. Can you explain more again?
Can you show us your presentation?
Yeah. Oh, La Banca ya, La Banca ya.
Yes, La Banca.
Okay, La Banca. I will share again. This one, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, so
Like how peternakan is
yeah.
converted to pakan product for fish for perikanan. For yes.
Oh yeah. Uh, there are some teknologi tepat guna ya, if we said in the Indonesian language ya,
Yes.
useful teknologi, proper technology. That when can we do so the waste of the, for example, the waste of the agriculture can to be uh, fattening and breeding to be put for the cow, yeah, or for the chicken, and also the waste of the cow and chicken can be processed by teknologi tepat guna so that it can be put for the fishery for the another animal. That is my explanation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Arman.
Yeah.
And Mr. Lutfi, how about you?
So like what we use for feeding the fish, is it the cow and chicken itself, or like the cow and chicken's food?
Okay. Uh, for the cow, it can be the waste of the cow can be processed to get food for the fishery, not for the another animal, for the fishery. For example, there are integrated farming, yeah, fishery and peternakan, that in the front of the water there are uh, chicken, there are chicken peternakan ya istilahnya, apa ya, pekasan ya, and the waste of the chicken down in the water, and it will get without process to be food for fish. That is for example in the air tawar ya.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, maybe any question again from other audience and participant? Raise hand, please, or chat to the link of Q&A. Okay, if no question, maybe this session is enough. So please, Mr. Arman, give concluding remarks maybe from the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Khairul. So for sustainable business model is have a lot of benefit for millennial, yeah, millennial generation to be or to make get opportunity to be an entrepreneur, yeah, by using innovative and creative thinking. I think that our millennial can get opportunity to be a new entrepreneurship in the opportunity of the sustainable development goal business model that must be reached by you. Oke, semangat.
Mantap. Thank you, Professor Arman Hakim Nasution. And ladies and gentlemen, we finally come to the end of this GLS SDGs. So before I close this session, I would like to thank the speaker for the informative, insightful, interesting presentation, and also amazing And then also the participant for the every active participation also I say thank you. Finally, give the applause for the speaker and for you all. Once again, thank you and see you next session, next meeting. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bye-bye.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullah.
Or maybe from the committee, give certificate on something like that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Arman, for the excellent lecture today. And thank you, Associate Professor Hoirul, for conducting this amazing session. And once again, for all participants, please give applause to our speaker and moderator by using the Zoom reaction feature. Okay, furthermore, we would like to present a certificate awarding to our speaker and moderator today. So this is the certificate presented for Dr. Arman. Thank you, Dr. Arman. And then this is the certificate presented for Associate Professor Hoirul Mahfud. Once again, thank you very much to Dr. Martin, Dr. Arman, Associate Professor Hoirul for your availability on today's guest lecture series. Okay, before we end our lecture today, we invite you all participants as well as the honorable speaker and moderator to take a group photo. So for the participants, please open your camera. Okay. Yes. So we have 9 slides here. So for all participants, please keep your smile and I will count. Okay, for the first slide, 1, 2, 3. Second slide, 1, 2, 3. Third slide, 1, 2, 3. Fourth slide, 1, 2, 3. Fifth slide, 1, 2, 3. And then next slide. 7th slide. And then for the last slide. Okay, great. Now we have finished the group photo. Then for the participants, please fill the feedback form through the link bit.ly/feedbackgls that you can also see on the Zoom chat room. Okay, tomorrow we will have 2 parallel guest lecture series. So the first one will be presented by Dr. Gindo Tampubolon from University of Manchester and Dr. Joko Purwanto from ITS. The topic will be related with SDGs number 3, good health and well-being. And then the second one, there are Associate Professor Wan Abdul Rahim, Wan Muhammad Isa from University Teknologi Mara, and Karina Pradini Tujuan Magister Engineering from ITS as our speakers. And then the topic is around SDGs number 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities. Finally, we have reached the end of today's guest lecture series, and we sincerely apologize for any mistakes we may have made in presenting as Master of Ceremony and Committee. Thank you very much to Dr. Martin, Dr. Arman, Associate Professor Hoirul, and all participants for the attention and cooperation. We will see you in tomorrow guest lecture series on SDGs. Thank you and good afternoon.